The rain tapped a mournful rhythm against my apartment window, each drop blurring the city lights into a smear of gray and gold. I sat cross-legged on my faded couch, my laptop balanced on my knees, its screen glowing with an email I couldn't bring myself to answer. My boss's words stared back at me. "We need to discuss your performance." The cursor blinked, mocking my hesitation. I was 27, and somehow, my life felt like a house of cards. One wrong move from collapse. The weight of it all pressed against my chest, heavy and unyielding, when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. My mother's name flashed across the screen, a name that once meant safety, but now carried a faint sting of dread. I reached for the phone, my thumb hovering over the answer button. "Hey, Mom," I said softly, pressing it to my ear. No response came, just a faint rustle, like fabric brushing against something. I frowned, thinking it was a pocket dial, but then I heard it. A low creak, the sound of a chair settling under weight. My mother's voice cut through, sharp and cold, like a blade slipping through silk. "She's wasting her life, Tom. She'll never amount to anything." My breath caught, my fingers tightening around the phone. I should have hung up, should have spared myself, but I couldn't move. My father's voice followed, gruff and heavy with disappointment. "You're too soft on her, Ellen. She's had every chance. College, that job we pulled strings for. And what's she done? Nothing. She's a letdown, plain and simple." The words landed like blows, each one sinking deeper than the last. My mother sighed, her tone softer, but no less cutting. "She pays her rent, doesn't she?" "That's something." My father let out a bitter laugh, the kind that made my stomach twist. "Rent? That's the bare minimum. You think I'm proud of a daughter who's scraping by, chasing dreams that'll never pan out? We should have stopped at one kid. She was a mistake we're still paying for." I pressed my hand to my mouth, stifling a sob. The phone trembled against my ear, but I couldn't let go, couldn't stop listening to the truth I'd always feared. My name was Nora, and to them, I was nothing more than a regret. The rain outside seemed to grow louder, drowning out the world, but not the ache in my chest. I ended the call, my thumb shaking as it hit the button, and the silence that followed was worse than their words. It was the kind of silence that swallowed you whole. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall, the email still open on my laptop. My apartment, a cramped one-bedroom in a noisy part of Chicago, felt smaller than ever. The peeling paint, the secondhand furniture, the stack of unopened bills on the counter, they all screamed failure. My parents' voices echoed in my head, relentless, a letdown, a mistake. I'd spent years trying to prove them wrong, to show them I could be more than the quiet girl who never quite fit their vision of success. But maybe they were right. Maybe I was chasing something I'd never catch. Growing up, I'd always been the odd one out. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child, straight A's captain of the soccer team, now a lawyer with a corner office and a fiancé who sparkled in every photo. I was the dreamer, the one who sketched in notebooks instead of studying, who wrote stories in the margins of my textbooks. My parents had indulged it when I was young, calling it cute, but by high school, their patience had worn thin. "Art won't pay the bills, Nora," my father would say, his voice heavy with warning. My mother would nod, her eyes distant, as if she wished I'd been born someone else. I tried to meet their expectations. I'd gone to college, majored in marketing because it seemed practical, landed a job at a mid-sized ad agency. But the work drained me, endless meetings, soulless campaigns, a boss who critiqued every idea I pitched. I'd sneak away to write in my spare time, pouring my heart into short stories I never showed anyone. It was my secret rebellion, my way of holding on to the girl I used to be. But now, sitting in the dim glow of my apartment, those stories felt like childish fantasies. My parents' words had stripped away the last of my defenses, leaving me raw and exposed. I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, a maze of lights and lives, each one moving forward while I felt stuck. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my breath fogging the pain. I wanted to scream, to call them back, and demand why they thought so little of me. But I knew the answer. I'd always known. To them, I was the daughter who'd never measure up, the one who dared to want something different. The email from my boss blinked in the corner of my eye, a reminder of the life I was failing at. I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of their judgment suffocating me. But somewhere, deep inside, a spark flickered, a tiny, stubborn refusal to let their words define me. I didn't know what it meant yet, didn't know if it was courage or desperation. All I knew was that I couldn't stay here, frozen in their disappointment forever. I turned away from the window, my heart pounding. The rain kept falling, steady and unrelenting. But for the first time that night, I felt something shift. It wasn't hope, not yet, just the smallest crack in the darkness, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to prove them wrong. Not for them, but for me. The morning after the call, the rain had stopped, but the air in my apartment felt heavy, as if the weight of my parents' words still lingered. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, my reflection pale and hollow-eyed, the bags beneath them a map of sleepless hours. My phone sat silent on the counter, but their voices echoed in my mind. A letdown, a mistake. I gripped the sink, my knuckles widening, and forced myself to breathe. I couldn't let those words be the end of me, not yet. I dragged myself to the ad agency, my cubicle a gray cage under fluorescent lights. The email from my boss still loomed unanswered, but today I had a meeting with her. My stomach churned as I sat across from Ms. Carter, her sharp eyes scanning me over her glasses. "Nora, your work is adequate," she said, her voice clipped. "But adequate isn't enough. We need bold ideas, not safe ones. Step up, or we'll need to reconsider your role." Her words stung, layering fresh doubt onto the wound my parents had opened. I nodded, mumbling promises I wasn't sure I could keep, and left her office feeling smaller than ever. Back at my desk, I stared at my computer, the cursor blinking on a blank document. I was supposed to pitch a campaign for a new client, but my mind was elsewhere. My parents' disdain, Ms. Carter's warning, they swirled together, a storm I couldn't escape. I opened a drawer and pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with my secret stories. I hadn't touched it in weeks, but now my fingers traced the ink, the words a lifeline to the girl I used to be. There was a story about a woman who left everything behind to find herself, unfinished but alive with possibility. I'd stopped writing it when work became too demanding, when I'd let their expectations drown my dreams. That evening, I sat on my couch, the notebook open in my lap. Chicago's skyline glittered outside, indifferent to my turmoil. I thought of my brother, Ethan, who'd called earlier to invite me to his engagement party. His voice had been warm, but I'd heard the pity beneath it, the unspoken belief that I was the family's weak link. I hadn't told him about the call, about what I'd overheard. I wasn't sure I ever would, but sitting there, I realized something. I couldn't keep living for their approval. Not my parents, not Ethan, not Miss Carter. I needed to live for me. The idea came like a spark in the dark, a reckless, terrifying leap. What if I left? Not just the job, but the city, the life I'd built to please everyone else. I'd always dreamed of writing, of telling stories that mattered. There was a writer's retreat in a small town in Colorado, one I'd bookmarked months ago but dismissed as impractical. It was 3 months long, affordable and open to beginners. The deadline to apply was in 2 days. My heart raced at the thought, fear and excitement tangling together. Could I do it? Could I walk away from the safety of my paycheck, my apartment, my predictable failure? I spent the night researching, the glow of my laptop casting shadows on the walls. The retreat promised workshops, mentorship, and a chance to finish a manuscript. It was a risk. My savings would take a hit, and I'd have to quit my job. But the alternative was staying here, shrinking under the weight of everyone's disappointment, including my own. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I typed a resignation letter, my fingers trembling but sure. I didn't send it yet, but the act of writing it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The next day, I applied for the retreat, pouring my heart into the application essay. I wrote about the stories I'd hidden, the dreams I'd buried, the fear of never being enough. It was raw, honest, and terrifying to send into the world. At work, I kept my head down, dodging Miss Carter's scrutiny, but inside, I was buzzing. For the first time in years, I felt alive, like I was standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. A week later, the response came. I was accepted. The retreat started in a month, and they'd even offered a scholarship to cover part of the cost. I sat on my couch, the email open, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just the acceptance, it was the validation, the proof that someone, somewhere, saw potential in me. But the joy was fleeting, replaced by a new fear. Telling my family, I called Ethan first, hoping his warmth would soften the blow. A writer's retreat? He said, his tone a mix of surprise and skepticism. Nora, that sounds cool, but are you sure? Quitting your job? What if it doesn't work out? His concern felt like a cage, trapping me in the same doubts I was trying to escape. I mumbled something about needing to try and hung up my resolve, wavering. Telling my parents was harder. I went to their house, a tidy suburban home that always felt like a museum of my failures. My mother's eyes narrowed as I explained, her lips a thin line. Writing, she said, as if the word itself was foolish. Nora, you're throwing away a stable career for a hobby? My father didn't bother hiding his scorn. You'll be back here in 6 months, begging for help. You're not cut out for this. Their words cut deep, but I stood my ground, my voice shaking. I'm doing this for me. I don't need your approval. Driving back to my apartment, their disbelief clung to me like damp clothes. But beneath the hurt, that spark of defiance burned brighter. I sent my resignation letter that night, my heart pounding as I hit send. Carter's reply was curt, wishing me luck in a way that felt like dismissal. I didn't care. For the first time, I was choosing myself. The weeks before the retreat were a blur. I sold half my furniture, packed my life into a suitcase, and sublet my apartment to a grad student. Every step felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown. The night before I left, I sat on the floor of my nearly empty apartment, my notebook in my hands. I wrote a new line in the story about the woman who left everything behind. She didn't know where the road would lead, but she knew it was hers to walk. The next morning, I boarded a bus to Colorado, the city fading behind me. The Rockies loomed in the distance, vast and unyielding, a promise and a challenge. I didn't know if I was running away or running toward something, but as the miles stretched out, I felt lighter. My parents' words still echoed, but they were quieter now, drowned out by the hum of the engine and the beat of my own heart. I was Nora, and for the first time, that name felt like it belonged to me. The bus rolled into the small Colorado town just as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, casting long shadows over the streets. I stepped off, my suitcase heavy in my hand, and took in the place that would be my home for the next 3 months. The town was quiet, with quaint storefronts and a single coffee shop glowing warmly against the dusk. The retreat center, a converted Victorian house, nestled at the edge of a pine forest, loomed ahead. Its wraparound porch and soft lights promised refuge, but my stomach twisted with nerves. I'd left everything behind, my job, my apartment, my family's expectations. But standing here, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Inside, the retreat director, a woman named Clara with kind eyes and a gray braid, greeted me. Nora, welcome, she said, her voice steady, like she could sense my unease. The other participants milled about, a mix of ages and backgrounds, their chatter filling the high-ceilinged common room. I smiled politely, but their confidence, real or not, made me feel small. These were writers, people who'd likely been honing their craft for years, while I was just a dreamer, with a notebook full of half-finished stories. My parents' words crept back. You're not cut out for this. I pushed them away, but they lingered like a bruise. That first night, I barely slept. My room was small, with a creaky bed and a window overlooking the forest. The silence was deafening compared to Chicago's constant hum, and my mind raced. What if I failed here too? What if I poured my heart into this and came up empty? By morning, I was exhausted but determined to try. I owed it to myself. The retreat schedule was intense: morning workshops, afternoon writing sessions, and evening critiques. Our first workshop was led by Clara, who asked us to share why we were here. When my turn came, I hesitated, my throat tight. "I want to find my voice," I said finally, my words barely above a whisper. "I've been hiding my stories for too long." The room was quiet, but Clara nodded, her eyes warm. "That's a brave start, Nora," she said. I clung to her words, a lifeline in the sea of my doubt. The days that followed were a blur of learning and vulnerability. I wrote furiously, resurrecting the story about the woman who left everything behind. It was messy, raw, but it felt like mine. In workshops, I listened to others read their work. Poetry that cut like glass, prose that painted worlds I'd never seen. Their talent intimidated me, but it also sparked something. I wanted to be better, to dig deeper. Clara's feedback was gentle but firm. "Your writing is heart, Nora, but you're holding back. Let yourself feel the pain. That's where the truth lives." Her words hit hard. I'd spent years burying my pain, my parents' disapproval, my brother's pity, my own fear of failure. Writing meant facing it all, and it terrified me. One afternoon, during a break, I wandered into the forest, the pine needles crunching under my boots. The air was crisp, scented with earth and resin. I sat on a fallen log, my notebook open, and wrote a scene where the woman in my story confronted her family. The words poured out, angry and unfiltered, and by the time I stopped, my hands were shaking. I wasn't just writing about her, I was writing about me. The evening critiques were the hardest. Sharing my work felt like standing naked in a spotlight. Most of the group was kind, but one participant, a sharp-tongued novelist named Derek, didn't hold back. "It's emotional, sure," he said after I read a chapter, "but it's predictable. You're leaning on cliches. Push harder." His words stung, echoing my parents' scorn, but Clara interjected, "Derek, critique the work, not the writer." "Nora, you're finding your footing. Keep going." I nodded, my face burning, but her defense gave me strength. I wasn't a failure here, not yet. As weeks passed, I found a rhythm. I wrote every day, my story growing into something real, a novel about a woman rebuilding herself after betrayal. I made friends too. There was Lila, a poet with a laugh like wind chimes, who shared her coffee and her fears of never being published. And Sam, a quiet sci-fi writer who listened when I rambled about my family. They didn't pity me, they understood. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. But the past wasn't done with me. One evening, as I checked my phone, a rare break from the retreat's no-tech policy, I saw a voicemail from my mother. My heart sank. I hadn't spoken to my parents since I'd left, and part of me hoped they'd forgotten me. I played the message, her voice cool and measured. "Nora, Ethan's engagement party is next month. We expect you to be there. Don't embarrass us. No mention of the retreat, no questions about how I was. Just another demand, another chance to prove I wasn't enough." I deleted the message, but it left a mark. That night, I couldn't write. I sat in the common room, staring at my laptop, the cursor mocking me again. Lila found me, her brow furrowed. "You okay?" she asked, sliding onto the couch. I shook my head, the words spilling out. My parents' call, their dismissal, the voicemail. She listened, her eyes soft but fierce. "Nora, they don't get to define you. You're here doing this. That's more than they'll ever understand." Her words stayed with me, but the doubt lingered. The retreat was halfway done, and while I'd made progress, I wasn't sure it was enough. My novel was taking shape, but it was rough, and Derek's critiques still stung. Clara noticed my struggle. During a one-on-one session, she asked, "What's holding you back, Nora?" I hesitated, then told her about my parents, the voicemail, the fear that I'd never be good enough. She leaned forward, her voice steady. Writing isn't about proving them wrong. It's about telling your truth. You have a story to tell, trust it. Her words were a spark, reigniting the defiance I'd felt in Chicago. I threw myself back into my novel, revising with a new ferocity. I wrote scenes that hurt, scenes that healed. One night, I shared a revised chapter in critique, my voice steady despite my nerves. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Lila clapped, her grin wide. Even Derek nodded, grudgingly. Better, he said. You're getting there. It wasn't praise, but it was enough. As the retreat's end loomed, I faced a new question. What next? My savings were dwindling, and I had no job, no apartment to return to. The thought of going back to Chicago, to my parents' judgment, made my skin crawl. But the retreat had changed me. I wasn't the Nora who'd boarded that bus, scared and broken. I was stronger, surer, with a manuscript I believed in, and a voice I was learning to trust. The night before the final workshop, I sat on the porch, the stars bright above the pines. My notebook lay open, the story nearly complete. I thought of my parents, of Ethan's party, of the life I'd left behind. I didn't know what the future held. A job, a home, a way to keep writing. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I'd found something here, something no one could take away. I was Nora, and I was enough. The final day of the retreat dawned crisp and golden, the Rockies glowing under a sky so clear it felt like a promise. I stood on the porch of the Victorian house, my suitcase packed, my notebook tucked safely in my bag. The past 3 months had reshaped me, carving out a space where my voice could breathe. My novel was nearly complete, a story of a woman who found strength in her scars, and though it wasn't perfect, it was mine. But as I boarded the bus back to Chicago, a knot tightened in my chest. I was returning to the city I'd fled, to a purr he heard me first, his face lighting up as he crossed the room. "Nora, you made it," he said, pulling me into a hug. His fiancée, Lauren, joined us, her smile genuine. "Heard you've been writing," she said. "That's amazing." Their warmth was a balm, but I braced myself for my parents. I found them near the bar, my mother in a crisp navy dress, my father in a suit that looked too tight. Their eyes landed on me, and the air shifted, heavy with unspoken judgment. "Nora," my mother said, her tone cool. "You look well," my father grunted, sipping his drink. "So, you're back. What's the plan now? Back to wasting time?" The words stung, but I stood taller, my voice steady. "I'm a writer," I said. "I've been working on a novel, and I'm freelancing. I'm building a life I believe in." My mother's lips pursed, and my father scoffed. "A writer? That's not a career. You'll regret this when you're broke." Their dismissal was familiar, but this time it didn't break me. I thought of Clara, of my manuscript, of the spark I'd nurtured in Colorado. "I'm not doing this for you," I said, my voice firm. "I'm doing it for me." I turned and walked away, my heart pounding but light. For the first time, their words didn't own me. I joined Ethan and Lauren, who introduced me to their friends. When they asked what I did, I said, "I'm a writer," and it felt true. The party blurred into laughter and clinking glasses, and though my parents' presence lingered, it no longer consumed me. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a new rhythm. Mia's couch became my temporary home, and I landed my first freelance gig, a short article for a local magazine. The pay was small, but seeing my byline in print was a victory. I kept writing my novel, polishing it with the lessons from the retreat. Lila and Sam stayed in touch. Our group chat, a lifeline of encouragement. One night, Lila sent a link to a literary G contest with a deadline in a month. "Submit your manuscript," she wrote. "You're ready." I hesitated, fear creeping in. But I thought of the woman in my story, the one who'd faced her past and kept going. I spent days revising, pouring everything into the pages. When I hit submit, I felt a rush of pride, not because I expected to win, but because I dared to try. Life wasn't easy, freelancing was unsteady, and I took odd jobs, barista shifts, dog walking to make ends meet. But each small step felt like defiance, a refusal to let my parents' doubts define me. I started a blog, sharing snippets of my writing and stories from the retreat. To my surprise, it gained traction. Readers drawn to my honesty about failure and resilience. Messages poured in from strangers who'd felt unseen, their words a reminder that my story mattered. One evening, as I sat in Mia's apartment, my phone buzzed with an email. My heart stopped when I saw the sender, the literary contest. I opened it, my hands shaking, and read the words, "Congratulations, Nora! Your manuscript has been shortlisted." I screamed, startling Mia, who laughed as I read the email aloud. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it was proof that my voice had weight, that my story could reach beyond me. I thought of calling my parents, of telling them, but I stopped myself. Their approval wasn't what I needed anymore. Instead, I texted Ethan, who replied with a string of excited emojis and a promise to celebrate. I called Lila and Sam, their cheers echoing through the phone. They were my family now, the ones who saw me for who I was. As winter settled over Chicago, I found a tiny studio apartment, its windows overlooking a quiet street. It was modest, but it was mine. I hung a print from the retreat, a sketch of the Rockies. Above my desk, a reminder of the place where I'd found myself. My manuscript was still in the contest, and I kept freelancing, each byline a brick in the life I was building. I wasn't rich or famous, but I was free. One night, I sat at my desk, my laptop open to a new story. It was about a girl who carried her pain like a stone until she learned to set it down. As I wrote, I thought of the rain-soaked night when I'd overheard my parents, the words that had nearly broken me. They'd called me a mistake, but they were wrong. I was Nora, a writer, a dreamer, a woman who'd chosen herself. And that was enough.